Sure, we'll start at the top. Where does CCL stand on merging the need for economic stimulus with the need for climate action? I'll
Yep.
start with the main part. So, where does CCL stand on merging the need for economic stimulus with the need for climate change action? Uh, we would love to see this. So, I interpret this as we are expecting further COVID relief packages. That is even as Congress figures out how to vote and how to debate. I do think that we are going to see more COVID relief packages. Some have been calling them stimulus packages. And there has been a big push within the environmental movement to combine that with the need for climate action. Uh, we think that would be great, but our observation is that that has been trying and that they're running into a brick wall with the Democrats. And again, I look to that climate crisis committee and the fact that they haven't introduced they haven't issued their report. And my thought is that if the Democrats are trying to keep COVID relief specific to COVID and not trying to accomplish other goals, then I think that there's a high potential for trying to wedge that in there to going very badly and to damaging your relationships. And that is the sense that we've gotten from other environmental groups when they're pushing this with Democrats. That is not leading to good meetings. And so we would love to see that. We think it's smart, but it's tough sledding when so many people have lost their jobs and when the economy is and when people are dying. So I don't think that that's we know that ball is being covered. Thinking again of CCL as being part of an ecosystem, we know that there are organizations who are continuing to push that, who are continuing to take on that risk of their relationship. And so we are taking a different line. Would love to see that. Certainly wouldn't get in the way, but that's our thinking there. Next one at the top: does Reclaim Act make sense as an ask in districts where there is no coal industry? Yeah, it does. It certainly makes sense because we're all Americans, right? And so this is. Here we have people living in coal country who are suffering from the environmental impacts of coal mining that are affecting them, that are affecting their hope for the future. And this was something that, the people in those areas were coal miners that worked in the coal industry, and that provided energy, which has saved lives. And so I think that this does make sense because we want to help them clean up their environments. And as a national organization that does have volunteers in those districts, we want to push back on the stereotype and of environmental groups as being in the big cities alone. CCL has succeeded in getting volunteers from every congressional district. We have people everywhere, and they are our members. So this is something that will help them. Again, this is an idea that they had that helped them with their members of Congress. And so I think that we absolutely can do that. I think it absolutely is relevant for the whole organization. And I think it's the right bill for this moment. Next at the top, what is an effective response if a non-co-sponsor of HR 763 says, I'll consider it after the fall 2020 election? When can I follow up with you about that? So if they say something like that, then you ask, when would be a good time for me to follow up with you on that? And so you would say, would that be November? We're having another lobby day in late November. Could I ask you about that then? And what would be some good questions to ask you about? So that's what you want to do. You want to, if they're giving you something like that, if they're giving you a pretty specific time, make it more specific and ask permission to follow up, because then you got them on the hook. And if they are surprised when you follow up and say you said this, they have only themselves to blame. So that is an effective response if a non-co-sponsor says, I'll consider it after the fall 2020 elections. Next, what is CCL's stance on the feasibility of carbon capture and storage? My understanding is that technology largely does not yet exist, and I'm concerned that relying on a solution carries huge risk. Well, if you look at the IPCC report from October of 2018 and about a 1.5 degree world, the IPCC report, consensus document, best scientists in the world said they had a lot of scenarios that involve carbon capture and sequestration. And so if the scientists are saying this is an important part of a lot of our scenarios for how we stay below 1.5 degrees centigrade, I think you're right, it doesn't exist yet on a scale that we need it, but we need to figure it out, otherwise we're not going to stay below 1.5 degrees centigrade. And so that's our stance on that. And I would remind you that there is a carbon capture and sequestration provision in the Energy Innovation Act. I think it's section 9906, and it provides a rebate for the amount of CO2 that can be reasonably expected to stay underground, and it requires that such sequestration is safe and permanent. Next question. How can we convince our Republican representative to co-sponsor a bill that mostly supported by Democrats? We get the sense that he's unlikely to break from the PAC. Interesting. So you bring up the PAC, and I think that that's where we're at. I don't think that the problem right now is a question so much of the policy. It's a question of politics. So we have what I like to think of as a jailbreak problem. And so I think that for that Republican member of Congress, what I would focus on is the support that is building. I would go to energyinnovationact.org. I would go to those endorsements. I would go to those supportive statements. And I would look at what is the population in your district? Who are there people who or groups that represent or overlap with groups that are in the district, and say, you know, and lead with that. Here's this statement from this group. They've already got your back if you get on this. And then have them talk to Francis Rooney about other Republicans who might be on board. Cracking the jailbreak problem is a problem. I haven't figured out how to do that, but I would recommend that you lean on those endorsements. We know members of Congress are interested in those. We have the supportive statements. Lean in on that and see if that works. What is CCL's position on the Market Choice Act that eliminates the gas tax and replaces it with a carbon tax? I believe this has 2 Republican co-sponsors. It does. It has Brian Fitzpatrick and it has Francis Rooney. Brian Fitzpatrick was the other original when this bill was first introduced in the last Congress. We're still not 100% sure why it hasn't jumped back on. Our position on the Market Choice Act is that it's wonderful to have a lot of ideas. It is one of 4 bipartisan carbon pricing bills, ours being a second. You've got the SWAP Act, and then I'm forgetting the title of the other one, but it is great to have all these options. I think that the Market Choice Act has some distinct differences that enrich the discussion. Our favorite is still the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So we like that for a lot of reasons. We don't really want to eliminate the gas tax. But I think that it's valuable to have this discussion, because we are cognizant this bill still has a lot of times where it could change. It needs to go through markup in those 3 committees, Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, and Foreign Affairs. We know that the Senate bill needs to be introduced, and then it needs to go through markup. It can change. A different bill could be introduced close enough. It can change in committee. And then those 2 bills, once they're passed out of both houses, they need to go to conference committee. It can change again. So there's lots of opportunities to change the bill. And if we have bills like the Market Choice Act, like the SWAP Act, that have new ideas, different ideas, that enriches the discussion and makes it more likely that something gets over the line and that we reduce emissions. So that's my thinking on the Market Choice Act. Where's the citation for renewable energy creating 2 or 3 times the jobs of fossil fuels? We can get that for you. That is, where does that come from? That's in a lot of places. I think that what you want to look for is, I think it's EESR, I forget what that stands for, but they have a jobs report, a renewable jobs report. This used to be a function of the federal government. In the change of administration, that was no longer funded. Now a nonprofit has taken that up. And it looks at job creation in renewable and sustainable energy. So that factor has been around for a while. I think we also have a jobs laser talk that you might be able to go to more quickly. So if you go to our website, go to the very bottom, find laser talks, find the laser talk on jobs, and you should be able to find that stat and the reference. Since many of our Democratic senators have co-sponsored the Clean Economy Act of 2020, what can you tell us about the Clean Economy Act of 2020? Not much. That is not something that has been that I've really focused on. If Democratic senators have been on it, it sounds, the way you phrased that question, like there aren't many Republicans on it. And so I think that we're interested in bipartisan bills. The climate has to be an issue that is a bridge between the parties. It's too important of this. So I tend not to focus too much on bills that have only Democrats on them. How are we? I've gotten several questions about the mechanics of delivering the dividend. The recent $1,200 distribution to households was somewhat rocky. Your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, as I said, the dividend was the number one thing that came up in our meetings last June. It came up in 33% of meetings, 1 out of every 3. And most of the time they're asking about how the dividend would be delivered. We have an 82-page report, the dividend delivery study, which is available on our website. That answers every question I've ever gotten from a member of Congress or their staff on delivering the dividend. And it has answered a lot of questions they had not yet anticipated. That's number one. Number two, we just did this. Even if it was rocky, that's beautiful because we can learn from that rocky rollout and we can correct it. So I would lean in on what are the things that you thought were rocky about this? How do we fix that? Some of those answers may actually be in the dividend delivery study already. But if not, that's something that we're interested in chasing down. This is a great way of demonstrating the viability of this idea and figuring out where we need to concentrate more research on to make sure that it gets to as many people as quickly as possible with as much certainty as possible. How are we working with conservative groups like Republican and CLC who seem to have substantial support for carbon fee and dividend? We work very closely with both Republican and CLC. CLC is behind that economist statement, which is non-specific. That's great work. We have a great working relationship with both of those organizations. So, I mean, we mostly information share. We compare notes on how we view the latest news. It's interesting to get their perspective. I think that they're both doing fantastic work, but generally, it doesn't make sense to co-brand things. And it makes sense to pursue separate projects. So I would say we're very collegiate with them, and we love working with them. They're both doing fantastic work. Seem to have substantial support for carbon fee and dividend, yes, but they do not yet have a bill which has been introduced. And so I think that that's really where we will see. Next I have, will HR 763 be written before reintroduced in the next Congress in 2021? It has to be, because right now it says it starts in 2020. And so in 2021, that needs to be rewritten. It needs to account for the changing timeline and in terms of the emissions reduction schedule that's in section 9903. So yes, there are going to be changes. That is Congressman Deutsch's bill. And so our plan is to provide him with recommendations for updates that are more procedural and bureaucratic like that, just updating the start date. He is interested in reintroducing early in the next Congress. He's interested in reintroducing early in a bipartisan fashion. And so we want to be as helpful to him as we possibly can in both those goals. And so that's what we're doing right now. How is CCL engaging with Green New Deal activists, youth-led crime groups like the Sunrise Movement? As with the Republican groups, we also do a lot of information sharing with them. I would say with these groups, there has been another avenue of further collaboration on the state level carbon pricing initiatives. So Jamie DeMarco, our state level carbon pricing coordinator, has been really wonderful at working within coalitions, including groups like the Sunrise Movement. And I think that there's, when that happens, I think there's a mutual respect that we are pursuing different theories of change. And we are occupying different niches within the ecosystem, but we're part of the same ecosystem, and we want to see the same aims. Of course, sometimes that does break down, but certainly on the federal level, on the level that Jamie's working at, that respect is there. My member of Congress office says that HR 763 will hurt small oil producers more than large. How can we respond to that? Yeah, it probably will. And so small oil producers tend to be, so another thing, what I would respond to is I would respond in the current situation where the price of oil tanked. People aren't driving when they're on lockdown because they have nowhere to go. And so we had that really weird moment where oil prices actually went negative. And that's really, really hard for small and medium oil producers to deal with because they are highly leveraged. Generally, they have a lot of debt. And so if the price of oil for a barrel of oil is not above a certain point, it's very difficult for them to go out of business. And so with this crisis and what it's done to the price of oil, a lot of those groups may very well go out of business. There have been a couple of articles in the news on this. However, in reference to HR 763, if they go to business, those are also the oil companies that are least likely to support HR 763 or a carbon price in general, and are in fact most likely to be actively opposed to it. It's the oil majors, the larger oil companies, who are most likely to support HR 763 and to actually say that on the Hill. So there's a dynamic going on as a consequence of the pandemic, which very well could shift the balance of power in this. And so in your discussion, if this is something that your member of Congress has been interested in, check in with them on that, see how they're doing on that, and just check in and engage in that space and where it's going on COVID. I think that they will feel listened to if indeed you do listen to them and ask why are they interested in these companies? What's what they'll probably say jobs, but be prepared for that. Considering it's an election year and Congress will practically leave for the campaign in a couple of months, is it reasonable to expect that any of these bills will advance? Yeah, it is. We've always known that this year was going to be tough because it's a presidential election year. And so basically what's going to happen at the end of June and early July, Congress is basically done. And we knew this year before the pandemic that was going to be squeezed even more because of impeachment. Seems like a lifetime ago, but the impeachment proceedings went into this year, took up most of the auction in January. So that curtailed the year for advancement. I would say the ones that have the most likelihood of advancing would be the Reclaim Act and would be the Climate Ready Fisheries Act. And so those are related to jobs. And I think that if we're talking about additional COVID relief packages, jobs is going to be a high priority. They both have coalitions behind them. They have support behind them. They've already moved in the committee process. So I think that a primary ask and that supporting ask in particular have the largest chance of moving in this Congress. Next question, I've heard that there will be quite a few problems with government getting stimulus checks accurately and quickly. Do you think that we use that as a reason to support the dividend is likely to come up? Yeah, and then it got cut off. I think that those problems are something that we should lean into. I think we should be really curious about that and we should want to fix them because we see this obviously as a really important way of winning support for doing things that are important, and specifically the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And we're having a great practice run here with getting these checks to people, and we want to get these checks out at lowest cost to as many people who should get them as quickly as possible. And that's going to be really tough for people who are low income, who move, who lose a job, or who unbanked. And the dividend delivery study that I mentioned addresses all of those challenges. It provides ways of thinking about them, not necessarily solutions in all those cases, because they're so difficult, and these have been problems for such a long time. So I think that we can be interested in this. I don't think we're going to be dinged completely for not having all the answers, because they have been answers for such a long time for so many people and so many programs. The White House seems to be using the pandemic as an excuse to reduce environmental regulation. Should we be focusing on carbon pricing now, or getting our Congress people to defend these existing regulations? But Congress can't really do anything. All they can do is pass laws. The president, if they want to change regulations, they can. And so, I mean, this is a huge problem, obviously, but the way our government is structured is that after they pass through Congress, these regulations are under the administrative branch, the president. And so this White House has been more aggressive than I think most environmentalists imagine possible with respect to rolling back regulations, and it's not just on climate regulations; it's across the board. And so I think that this has really shown the fragility of this. We could talk to our members of Congress about piping up, but they when you get right down to it, they can't stop him. And so I don't think that that's the best use of this organization. What advice do you have for first-time lobbyists to make a good first impression, given the meeting won't be in person, so there won't be any handshakes? My recommendation is prepare and have good discussions with the people who have done this before. Prepare. For a first-timer, I always try to recommend remembering that they're people. The person you're meeting with is a person, and it's their job to be nice to you. So if you think you're going to get yelled at, as long as you remember CCL's appreciation and respect, it's their job to be nice to you, and they're people. And so I think that will be really important. We always prepare. Madeline is wonderful at that. But the extra preparation we have to do is we have to prepare to manage our team and really plan ahead of time who's going to speak when, and really make sure that's very clear. And we have to be better at monitoring ourselves and cutting ourselves off once we've set our part. When you get in there and there's a high pressure situation, there's a tendency to just keep on talking because you have this opportunity, you want to take it. But the way you can impress is being clear, getting your ask out there early, and moving from person to person in a professional way. The professionalism that CCL has been able to manifest, the appreciation and respect that we've been able to manifest across our organization, across a number of years, really, really impresses members of Congress. So that's what I would recommend there.
Yeah, I'll jump in here because we have 6 minutes left. So if you feel keep going, I just want to give everyone a heads up that anything that we don't get to, I'll put a link to where you can put it in the forums. So keep going, you're on a roll. I just wanted to make sure we got a 6-minute warning.
Thank you, Brett. What advice, we got that. Is it a good idea to make the point that HR 763, that with gas prices so low, a carbon fee and dividend, where'd it go? Will barely be noticed by citizens, but direct checks could really help suffering households. Maybe. Some people will be interested in that argument, others will not. So that is a good point. And The Economist magazine actually made that point in their most recent issue. But because we're so focused on COVID and so many people have lost their jobs, any increased cost will make members of Congress nervous. And so I would start that conversation by linking the direct checks to the cashback rebates that we have. Start from that space of people, suffering households are getting money. start with the fact that for the vast majority of households, it's going to be more money than they would get. And if you're using it in a Republican office, even in a Democrat office, point out that in this bill, it's paid for. So this isn't something that increases the debt. It's revenue neutral. So that's what I would do there. Will the Reclaim Act funnel money back into reviving those coal-driven economies, or will it help transpose those workers into more sustainable, greener, cleaner jobs and energy resources? It will direct money back into reviving those coal-driven economies. So one of the problems that these coal communities have is that the environmental devastation is so great that people don't want to start businesses there. They don't want to have jobs there. And so it's really hard to get going. And hope becomes very difficult in that context. And so this is about just getting to a state of environmental integrity where people want to come and they want to live there and they want to invest there and they want to stay there. I mean, these are communities that are being hollowed out over time, and it's devastating. It really is devastating. So the Reclaim Act will fund back to reviving those coal-driven economies. No, it's not I get the question. Not the coal economies. It's the economy. It's a new economy. It's a new economy. So that's what I think the coal, because of natural gas right now, I don't think the point is not to revive coal. Is it a good idea to make the point regarding HR 763 that got that? Could this funding possibly go to coal companies? I don't know 100% sure on that. I doubt it. But I can ask that question. I mentioned contacting Chris Coons about a Senate version of HR 763. What about Coons' Climate Action Rebate Act of 2019, supported by Dianne Feinstein? Let me tell you a secret. Chris Coons wrote that bill as a discussion point so he could get a Republican to reintroduce the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So that is a discussion point. It's not something that he wants to get a Republican and reintroduce the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So his real interest is, he wants a Republican. That's the most important thing. And he does think that the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is a better way of getting a Republican than the Climate Action Rebate Act of 2019. How do I find out if the Climate Reclaim Act will apply with its restrictions to my district? We do have that information with respect to states. We might be able to get it on the district level. And so I will talk with Madeline and Brett about the best way to make that information away to our volunteers. Would Danny discuss the other Energy Innovation Act? I would. The other Energy Innovation Act that I'm aware of is the one that Lisa Murkowski in the Senate, Republican of Alaska, chair of the Environment and Natural Works Committee, Natural Resources Committee, has introduced. So it's a huge bill. And we like that because it shows that she likes energy innovation. And it got a lot of coverage because it's the Republican chairman of an important committee in the Senate. So that's why it is really important that you include the bill number there and don't just say Energy Innovation Act. That could be confusing. Where are we collaborating with the existing coalition supporting the Reclaim Act? We have been in touch with part of that coalition is the NWF, the National Wildlife Federation. That's something that they've been involved with, and we've been consulting with them. What they told us is that this could move this year, either as a standalone bill or as part of a package. And they said that it would be helpful to have you all talking to members of Congress about it. And so it was at that point that we decided that this was something that we wanted to make our primary ask. So we did check in with that coalition. Brett, I think we're at time.
We have one more question. You're going to pick your favorite one, and that will be how we end it.
What about bringing up health issues? Bring up health issues. I think that that's something that is relevant right now. I know that the Health Action Team just came up with a document on talking points, and they distinguish between health issues that are a result of co-pollutants from burning fossil fuels, so your NOx, your SOx, your black carbon, and direct climate health impacts. So, for example, heat stroke because it's higher temperatures. And so I would be careful to make that distinction. And I would, yeah, I think that health issues can be important, but don't. I just be careful not to try and say that COVID is a health issue that is a result of climate. I think that if you are seen as appropriating this crisis where over 100,000 people in this country have died, that will be seen poorly. So the way to handle that is, something that has always concerned me is the health issues. These are the health issues that I see as a result of climate, both the burning of fossil fuels and the greenhouse effect. And so do it that way. Don't scaffold off of COVID too much.